I'm Estelle Bingham, and this is the Love Purpose Connection podcast. Here on Love Purpose Connection, I want to explore how to discover and really develop the secrets of a good life. I'm a holistic therapist and healer, and so over this series, I'll be sharing frank, inspiring, sometimes raw, often joyful conversations with a different guest each time, exploring just what those three words really mean, but also crucially, how you can discover and develop them in your own life. Today in Love Purpose Connection, I'm talking to Lisa Donovan, entrepreneur, model, and founder and CEO of The Pattern, the first ever astrology-based personality app. It was The Pattern that actually first connected me with Lisa, and I've always wanted to chat to her more about it, because whether you believe in astrology or not, and I happen to believe in astrology, it's a fascinating idea which uses the time, date, and place of your birth to create a map of your life's journey. This conversation is all about Lisa putting the app to work on me as I enter my 50th year. We recorded this back in April, which is the month of my birthday, and you'll also hear references to Chiron, which gives us an indication of what our core wounds are in the lifetime, and Green Tara, who is a Buddhist deity who is a face of the divine feminine and means a lot to me. I really hope you enjoy this episode. So, Lisa, welcome to the Love Purpose Connection podcast.
I'm so excited to be here.
When I first heard about The Pattern, one of my clients, she's an American client, she was like, have you heard about The Pattern? And I think she was one of those first 30,000 that had heard about The Pattern, and it was the word of mouth. And then sometime later, I was invited to a very quiet, small dinner with you, Lisa. I'm having dinner with Lisa, and for this amazing personal pattern horoscope moment. And I suppose I love that because, of course, I met you and I just loved you instantly. And then I thought, well, I've had so many readings in my life growing up with astrology, and you read me the astrology sort of breakdown, and it was just so spot on, and I loved it. So thank you for that.
Oh, it was like that. It was just wonderful meeting you and feeling like another tribe member. That's how I felt.
So why The Pattern? You know, you've had this quite extraordinary career, actually. You know, you started out as a YouTuber, but really visionary, like at the time when YouTube had just 2005, YouTube had just kind of become something, but no one was really into it. But you had that vision to understand that this could be an incredible platform for something.
The early days of YouTube. Yeah, those were wild, wild times, the Wild West. Yeah, it was right when YouTube started, and there was just a handful of us on there. It was just like a very odd place to be and a very odd choice I was making, but I made this channel and it kind of took off. It was so incredible because it was just a space. You know, it was again before online video or content conceptually even made sense. You know, it was like, what are you doing online? I don't understand. You know, so it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work too because there wasn't any money in it. So yeah, that's sort of when my life took a massive shift, you know, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, greatest shift of my life. And astrologically was going through a one in a lifetime cycle. I didn't know that at the time. I knew nothing about astrology, but when your life takes these shifts, I started seeking and searching and realizing the concept of who I thought I was nothing. And this is all an illusion. We're something deeper that is not about any of this stuff. And I had my first astrology reading, and it, you know, it blew me away just because it was this mirror, and it made sense of a lot of the choices I'd made in my life and the confusion and the different issues I'd had. And I became obsessed and started learning and reading and doing anything I could to absorb it. And it was this great tool for me at this challenging time. And that was the inspiration for the pattern. It's like, if I could mimic my experience and put it into an app, then everybody could feel safe during a challenging time, and everyone could understand each other and perspective and understand themselves and connect with others in this deeper way. And that's how that all started.
These dark nights are so profound and powerful and extraordinary for these changes, in our consciousness. They come and feel like breakdowns, and they're actually breakthroughs, and we all share these dark nights. What does the dark night feel like for you, Lisa? What did it feel like for you?
It was it was very intense. I mean, there's also different things going on, and this is again astrologically we're talking about there's cycles, things that are impacting you over time for extended periods of time. And Pluto is about, we're saying the dark night of the soul, it's about things that are rational, things that are logical, things that you cannot control happening in your life. And that's the point, that you can't control it. So
Yeah.
you're out of your depth and you have to surrender. And usually you have to feel things you don't want to feel and go through experiences you've never had before. And that's the point, to sort of break that ego, break that control pattern that you have. So, oh yeah, it just kept going, and, my father was sick. I had this physical thing I had to deal with, it was just one thing after another, but it was also deep and rich and makes you more authentic in a way, because you sort of have to strip away all the nonsense. And certainly up until that point, I was definitely doing a lot of that self-betrayal and not being true to myself. I'd spent a good 30 years being like, oh, that's fine. Everything's great. I don't need.
Yeah.
I was that like, I'll fix it. And anyway, and then, and of course it gave birth to the pattern, right? And I was, there was a few years where I was pretty hermetic and monastic. I mean, I didn't go out and do anything. I was just writing the pattern, because I was also just dealing with my own darkness, because you have to embrace it. The dark is not a bad thing. It's about owning it. And I'm actually in one right now. I've been in one this whole year. But then you go through them and they become different and they hit different parts of your chart, right? And so this one for me was about love and relationships, actually. So I'm on Pluto on the Descendant, so
Yes.
it's almost done. But man, you think you know things and then it just takes you deeper, and again just strips everything away, and you have to get just a little bit more real.
So there you were. You found yourself at 30 in this sort of the cave, because I think you went back home. You said dad was sick. You're downloading all of this content, like all of the content for a whole app for every sign.
Well, and part of it was, I was working with an astrologer, so I would kind of go meet him where he was, if he was in Ireland or wherever he was, and it was slow. The whole thing was slow too, because I was having to learn it in these like very short periods of time. I'd get it for like a week, and then I have to go back, and then maybe I get a phone call, so it was this very slow way of learning it. And then I'd write it, and then I would go out and sort of test it with every single friend, every, waiter, every cab driver, anybody would talk to me. And then I'd go back and be like, but this doesn't make sense, and then I'd learn another piece, and then I'd have to like rewrite it. It wasn't some like, oh, this is so fun, and you're like channeling. And so it was just
Yeah.
a lot of work, and sort of an obsession, because I was passionate about it, really passionate about the power of this and how it could hopefully empower people. That is the message of the pattern. It's not the way I thought of astrology, where we have all the answers and we know, and this is what's going to happen, which I think is disempowering. And also, I wanted it to be something for the people who would otherwise never use astrology, because I was somebody who wouldn't have, but I could have benefited from it.
It feels really, when I talk to you about the pattern, that it's a real sacred contract. It came at the end, well, 30.
Oh, actually, I was 33. So I was in my Jesus year.
So you're in your Jesus year, 33.
Mhm.
For people who don't know what the Jesus year is, that's when Jesus was said to have been crucified.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're in your Jesus years, and then we've got this kind of sacred contract feeling. And I really believe that, that this idea of having to learn all of this stuff really quickly from this astrologer, but then process it in your mind. But it's like you've done it before in another life, but it's also like you're just meant to do it.
It is. I love that you just said that, and I never thought of it that way. I think I was always thinking of sacred contracts in terms of people. And it's so interesting because it is that kind of thing. I feel that is the relationship I have been in for the last X amount of years. And it's constant mirror for me too, because you can't also blame it like you might blame another person for their behavior. It's really just a constant mirror and keeps me going, because there's days you're just tired and you don't feel like it, and and then there's days where it's just so incredible and so inspiring, and and you see the impact. But yeah, I guess that is what it is, because it wasn't even something I thought. It was just something I knew, an intuitive thing. I just said this is what I was doing, and I was like, oh, I guess that's what I'm doing. And then I started conceptualizing what it could be, but it was sort of a knowing.
So let's just talk through the pattern and let's talk
Yeah.
through how you have put, astrology sort of on its head a little bit by not going for the classic planet. So not going for the birth sign planet. You've chosen different planets. Tell us why you've done that.
Yeah, the sun sign, I think, is, we think of it as a bit more generic. It's a month long, and I think this is why astrology gets a bad rap, because people think astrology is just your sun sign, meaning the month you're born. That's all there is to it, and that's who you are, which obviously logically doesn't make sense that everybody born in the month of April, happy birthday.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh.
I love my birthday,
Uh,
but this year is a particular year. It's a big 50.
God. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad we're doing this. So the sun sign, that you're Aries, right? So that everybody born in this month is not the same person. They're not having the same day. That's not even logical. Mostly we think of sun sign as the thing that they used to sell newspapers. They knew everybody would know the month they're born. Now, to know the details of all the other planets, you'd likely have to go to professionals. But we think of them as much more archetypally who you are. So the moon, the Venus, the Mars, the ascendant, the midheaven, the moon changes sign every 2.5 days. That's already more specific. The ascendant every 2 hours. So this we feel like is archetypally much more indicative of who you are. And the sun is kind of more, maybe a little bit of the fuel you burn. But personality wise, I would look at your Sagittarius moon, which we talked about. So we look at the moon also as your lineage, kind of where you've come from. We think of it as though you've lived many lifetimes as this moon. So it's sort of the core, and it's usually when in doubt, when you're afraid. That's what you go back to.
Right, that's where I go, to that wisdom.
That's where you run, right? And so Sag, we know, is the seeker, the explorer. It's incredibly intuitive. It has its own GPS, its own way of doing things, its own path. Very independent, very free spirited, not afraid to be alone or on their own. So curious and optimistic about life and what is going on, and wanting to try it all. There can be that real restless, free spirit. I love Sag Moon. I'm a Gemini moon, so I have a lot of Gemini and Sag Moon friends, because there's sort of this, again, this sort of core. We think of it as your perspective. When you came into this life, it's kind of all you knew is like, well, let's go, let's try it. And I have my own truth and your own sort of path and your own knowing. Now, as a woman, I think we talked about this too. Men are much more rewarded for that in our culture. So I always love talking to Sag Moon women too. I don't do predictive astrology also. This is more when I see your chart, there's a spectrum of how all of these things could have manifested based on your choices. That's your destiny, is how you've chosen to deal with the fate of this chart. So and I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, and she's a woman and she's a Sag moon. Did you get to go out and really, be wild and free? Because usually a Sag moon was wild when they were young.
Yeah, no, completely.
All
I mean, I need to dance on tables quite regularly.
right.
I need to kick my heels up. I need the adventure. It's really at the core of who I am. And I really bring that to my work, actually, because there is so much joy in feeling that you can gift yourself that adventure. You can afford yourself the adventure.
That's right.
And I love what you say about, we'll come on to some of the other planets, what you say about the chart comes in with you, but we get to co-create what our destiny looks like in the shadow and the lightness, right? So,
Yes.
Saggy in the shadow, you're just constantly on an adventure, but we don't want to
Yes.
be constantly on an adventure. We need to ground sometimes too. So, and then you can be too grounded and you need the medicine and adventures.
That's exactly it. And knowing that perspective is great. So somebody coming with a Capricorn moon isn't going to understand a Sagittarius moon. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's these kind of, oh, why are they so this way? Or maybe that Capricorn moon has a Sagittarius rising, your Sagittarius moon. So they don't like it, but they're also interested in it, and it's where they're headed, and they have to learn about it. So essentially it's all archetypes, and what archetypes are really prominent, which are in your chart, and how you're co-creating with them. And the beauty of it is you take Sag Gemini, this creativity and this intuition, and it allows it to actually create something. It's like this incredibly creative thing that now is like, I'm going to manifest something, as opposed to just use it. Like if I didn't have Saturn, I would never have made the pattern. Never. So it really can be a great thing, but it's about, why do you do things? And if it's ever about guilt or shame, or because I should, or to people please, or any of these Saturn things, then you have to rethink doing that. And I mean, this is also when you have Saturn to your Mars, usually it brings challenges to relationships and romantic relationships, so that usually your best relationships are later in life because you're being forced to find full autonomy. And you do have a pretty powerful Chiron complex. You have almost an exact conjunction to your sun, of Chiron to your sun. So that means Chiron is a wounded healer. We'd say that there's something in your life, there's something you've dealt with, that is a deep sort of wounding somewhere that is personal to you, that is about your life, is about metabolizing that and understanding that. And it ultimately makes you the wounded healer. And you see Chiron there, that's what it's about. And you are about to start your Chiron return. So this is so major.
Wow. So tell me about that.
So it happens everybody at this age, at 50. Everybody will go through, it takes 50 years for Chiron to come back to the exact place it was at the time of your birth. So everybody will go through it. You're going through it double in that you have Chiron to your sun, and it's a signature on your chart. This is for everybody at this age. This is the deep healing year. So much of your life is already in this work, and you're so on the path. So I'd be so curious to see how this year is, and it's a beautiful thing. But it's a time not to try and not to push so much, just to be and to experience whatever comes up in this initiation. It's a powerful year.
Wow, I'm loving this, Lisa. For people who don't know about the North Node, can you let people know what that's about?
Well, I think this is where every kind of astrology really has its own uniqueness. Some people are very into the North Node. It's a bit complicated to explain, but it impacts sort of the version of the Sagittarius moon that you are, and the version of the Virgo rising that you are. So the node is helping us determine that you're the Pisces version of Sagittarius in your past life. So you really were definitely the most sort of empathetic, and there might have been a healing quality to how you used your Sag. I mean, it makes sense that you are a healer and you have this Chiron, and now you're the Virgo version of Virgo. I mean, your entire destiny and being here is about sacred work and your calling, and honoring that and that integrity in the way that you live out your sacred work.
I'm totally, like on the edge of my seat. Really wonderful. And so this idea of Chiron, the wounded healer, and what those wounds are in the lifetime. And so for me, definitely understanding in my 20s, in my early 20s, the mother wound. And, and that's been really my work, as that kind of deep pain with the mother, and what that then kind of pushed me into. So this idea, and this is what I want sort of this invite people to think about, our wounds are the portals for our growing. It's like the Buddhists say, this is a dimension of pain and suffering. It is a dimension of pain. You don't have to suffer, but we have to, it's how we metabolize those wounds and meet those wounds and be with them. And it's like, for me, my mother wound and the pain of that, is my work.
How old were you when this developed for you?
Well, it started from the beginning.
From the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. It started from the beginning because I grew up with mum on my own, but my awareness of the neglect and abandonment, and I understood it, but that didn't change it. That then opens this yearning or this real sense of confusion. It's so confusing when we land in this dimension, and we come from a place of pure sort of love, like energy. And so it was a strange sort of juxtaposition of having that understanding and then also being in a really spiritual home. So learning how to meditate when I was 7 years old. My channels were really open. And then when I was 8, I started writing. And I remember this idea of creating sacred space at a certain time when I was in really just very lonely. Because when we are these little people, the sense of loneliness and the loneliness that we feel as souls, it's so painful. And I would write, but really the divine feminine, it was Green Tara, really. Mother Mary and then Green Tara. Boom, that was my initiation. It's like, I have to find the mother who can hold beyond the limitations of the human mother when it hasn't been what it should have been.
Yes. And I feel like we are all this. We all have access.
We all have access.
And I certainly didn't grow up in a home like that at all. I mean, it was like, no, there is nothing, you will die and that's it. And then it's just, there's nothing and there's nothing out there. And that was sort of but I don't think that sat well with me. I think there was always a confusion, but I think that is really the pain we find ourselves in when we're disconnected from that deeper truth. And so somehow coming back to that, or always having that, or realizing that is such a gift.
And you're right. This is a remembered thing. This isn't just, I happen to have that set of things in my childhood, my lifetime, because this is the work that I'm meant to do. But every single person has the power, like you say, like the pattern is there to empower, because we all have the capacity to be more deeply connected and to feel the energy that exists.
There's so many distractions and there's so many ways to disconnect from it. I mean, it's all the things and all the addictions and all the stuff that you can keep yourself really disconnected from it. Because I think there's a lot of people I'll speak to who are not spiritual at all, but they talk about how it was as a child and how they could see and they heard these things. And I'm like, that's what it is.
Yeah. But also with you, Lisa, you've got this definite otherworldly vibration.
Yeah, I mean, I have an intuition, and I think there are times in my life where again, that's the pain. You know something and you do the opposite, right? Because of conditioning or culture or whatever. So it's, can you be with yourself? Can you really be, and hear and listen to your truth, which is what we're talking about. That is the spirit. And so, yeah, when I'm in that flow, it's incredible and it's the most beautiful piece. But then, sure enough, then life comes and so it's that balance. It's being able to come back to yourself, and I guess that's the practice.
That is the practice.
Unless you want to live in a cave or the woods where you don't have to see anybody or do anything. I'm always like, that would be so much easier. I was like, can I just live in the woods?
No, Lisa, we don't want you living in the woods. We want you in the world, doing your thing, doing your amazing, extraordinary stuff. So when I say the words love, purpose, connection to you, what do those words mean to you? Or do they bring up what kind of emerges?
I mean, certainly now, and I guess who I am now, even people ask me, like, what do you want? I'm like, I just want to be in my heart. I just want to be in my heart because my heart is where all the love is. And I just want to love and be loved. That's all. That's all that's interesting to me at this point. So, and even the pattern, all of this is just about connecting more authentically, more honestly from a place of the heart. So yeah, those words are music to my ears and just make me think of, being in my heart and what that feels like. And again, you can let life take you out of the heart, and then you're making decisions from a very different place, So it's, how do you stay in the heart? Because then it's all okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what my work is all about, is bringing people back into their hearts. So this journey just to that place of knowing that all that life is about loving and being loved, giving yourself permission to be loved.
To be loved. But even you with Chiron or Saturn, I have Saturn, so much of life is thinking you are not worthy of it, and I think that's a deep thing. Even I would say even this year, the dark night is, it's still there. The element of, will I allow myself to receive love? Am I worthy of it? Like on an existential level. And I feel like I have so much love in my heart. All I have is love to give, but then it's also, can you receive it? Can you allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to be loved? And and your work, I mean, I loved our session, and it's all about being in the heart. So thank you for your work.
Oh, Lisa, well, it's just been such a joy to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
To find out more about Lisa, she's at Mother of Patterns on Instagram. You can find me at Estelle.Bingham. I hope this new series is bringing you inspiration. Please do rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it. This podcast is produced by Sarah Cudden. Until the next one, wishing you all more love, purpose, and connection.